are those of the producers and/or the persons appearing on the program, and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of FRC Media, Bristol Community College, or the City of Fall River.
Good morning. Welcome to Spindle City Straight Talk. This is Chip.
And I'm CJ.
And we have our guest. We have a guest today, a gentleman who is pretty well known to anybody who follows politics in Fall River. He's well versed in not only what's going on today, but he's been involved in politics for quite a while in the city of Fall River. He's got a pretty good handle on virtually everything that's going on. So with that, we will welcome Dan Robillard.
Hey, Chip, what's going on?
That's a pretty, we got a lot of answers to that question, Dan. What's going on? So, well, I guess we can begin by saying there's a court date that's been established for the recall. It's October 27th, which I believe is a Monday, and it's not too far away. And we've been told that we have a city councilor already asking the judge to recuse himself, and this looks like this is going to be the saga of recusals. So I guess we can begin with that topic. But Danny, feel free to talk about anything you'd like.
Well, you know, as far as the saga of recusals go, I actually think that it was good that the Board of Elections mostly recused themselves, because most of the questions that are in play here are actually legal questions, and I think they belong in a court of law. And as far as Councilor Pelletier asking for Judge McGuire to recuse himself, I think that's absolutely ridiculous. While Judge McGuire was a former corporation counsel, that was a long time ago under former Mayor Ed Lambert, and he's been a judge for quite some time, and I see no conflict with him hearing this case.
Well, could it be, this is kind of a rhetorical question, but could it be that certain people feel that maybe his objectivity, because being a corporation counsel and the fact that maybe he has an opinion on how the city has degenerated or something, and I think maybe there are some people that may be fearful, but as you said, he's been on the bench for a long time. I think that, as you said, a lot of these questions are purely questions of law. It's not about perception. These are questions of law, and I think that any judge will rule on the law rather than, and I don't think it's going to have any influence. The law is the law. He's going to look at the opinion and say, was the 21st day acceptable or not, and all these other questions. And CJ's in the studio, and he's fiddling around in there. CJ, you want to weigh in here?
I'm here. As you can tell, I can bring up any number of us at the same time.
Okay.
I've been working on making this show so our guests can see all of us at the same time. So there you go. And it's just interesting, as you said. Leo Pelletier did come out publicly and said that Judge McGuire should recuse himself, and that could be for a number of reasons. And I think one of the biggest reasons is that he's already started making some decisions, and people aren't happy with some of those decisions. As you know, this is just one of the biggest fiascos ever going, and it just makes it look like nobody wants anything to happen. Although the mayor keeps saying, I want it to move forward, I want it to move forward, I want people to understand. I want, if it's legal, I want it to happen. So it just makes for interesting news, at least.
Well, Councilor Pelletier, this is the second move he's made this week that is questionable, in my opinion, raising the the Maplewood land bond trying to bring that up out of the ashes on Tuesday night. And, you know, I find it absolutely amazing how many of the city councilors are really inadequately informed about parliamentary procedure. I think the city council needs a training on motions and rules of order and debatable motions and so forth, because it's really ridiculous.
Well, you know, Danny, I find it interesting because I said at our last show that Chip and I are going to take up a donation and start looking for some books on Cushing's Rules of Order. And what's very interesting is I found them. You'll never guess how much they are. $3.65 a piece.
Where have you found them? Because I've been looking for copies of Cushing's for years, in every bookstore. I've checked the public library, and they're nowhere in sight.
They're on Amazon. They're on Amazon. They're only available as used books, but they're $3.65 a piece, and there's a whole bunch of them out there. They've also changed the name a little bit to American Rules of Parliamentary Procedure. So I'm not exactly sure. I think Chip would know that one better.
Well, it is available online, Dan. I've checked Cushing's online. You can check it. But I mean, you know, fundamentally, Cushing's is a little bit different as Atwood's and Roberts. But most organizations use Roberts, or some use Atwood's. A lot of unions usually use Atwood's. It's a little bit more informal. Cushing's is normally legislative kind of bodies and stuff, but they're all fundamentally the same. You know, a motion to reconsider is a motion to reconsider, and you're right. And it sometimes it's painful for people who know how to run meetings to go to the council meeting and see that nobody understands any of the fundamental rules of parliamentary procedure. But that's kind of secondary to what's going on. I mean, we've got all this. The city seems to be unraveling. I mean, as someone who's been around for a long time and dealt with a lot of issues, and you always go before the council, you all speak your mind. And, I mean, to me, we've seen like the city is basically falling apart. I mean, we've got Windowgate, we've got Gungate, and we've got the recall, and it just seems to be, and now it's spilled over into the council. The last council meeting was a fiasco. We had councilors, engaging citizens and yelling at them as they were walking back to their seats, and we've got councilors talking to each other about this reconsideration vote, and everything seems to be unraveling. I mean,
well, hopefully all of this is a sign for several councilors, because I'm going to agree with you. Look, I've known Pat Casey for 25 years. She's a nice lady, but she is the most ineffective counselor that I've dealt with in my 20-some years of politics. No matter which mayor is in office, if we became mayor or co-mayors tomorrow morning, she'd be our best friend. So she really has no credibility in the seat as far as I'm concerned, and she ought to be defeated. I mean, I can only recall one issue back when Bob Carrere was in office. There was a move to close down or prevent a karate school or an MMA school from coming into the city. And of course, Councilor Casey has a karate background, and so she opposed Mayor Carrere on that, but that's been it. Other than that, she's a clear rubber stamp for any administration that's in office. But, given what happened with the window project at City Hall, clearly you need an investigation. Anything less is not good government, period.
Well, that's true. That's very true. And, it's funny because, and I sent copies of this email out. I sent an email to the Attorney General's office. As many people remember, the Attorney General had recused herself from any and all decisions regarding Fall River because of her political and personal relationship with Will Flanagan. Now, I sent that out, and she had one of her people send me back an email which specifically stated that we do not make comments on pending investigations. Now that either means she has one or she doesn't, because we don't know. And further, all other questions were referred to Bristol County District Attorney Sam Sutter, who has referred the matter to a special prosecutor. Contact the special prosecutor for any comments. And we already know that the special prosecutor hasn't even asked anybody any questions on what's going on. And I don't know if he's waiting for this recall to go through, if he's waiting for it to not happen, if he doesn't want to taint it. There's a number of questions, and people in Fall River aren't getting real answers. And I think that's unfair to the populace and to the voters in general.
Well, I think given what came out at the council meeting, we need a complete investigation. I'm not sure how it's going to get done, but we need an investigation on window gating. For the betterment of the city, we really need a full and complete audit, which the three of us have been talking about for years.
Well, I think that, the only way we're going to see a complete audit, I sent an email to Suzanne Bump. She was in Fall River on Wednesday for the South Coast Business Expo over at White's. I could not get a hold of her at that time. I sent her an email. There has been no reply. I did get the fact that she did receive it. And I told her very clearly in the email that the people of Fall River want a total budget audit on every department and on every expenditure.
To be perfectly frank, I'm not sure that the type of audit that I'm looking for and the type of audit that Chip has called for years is one that the state auditor would or could conduct. I want a forensic audit, and I'm not sure that they would entertain that up there. You know, Chip, from having worked on healthcare for years, with the union years ago, I think you know the type of audit we're seeking, and I'm not sure that any state official would get that down deep.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Back when we did the audit, we hired Ernst & Young, which is one of the top accounting firms in the country, one of the highest rated accounting firms. So we had an individual, his name was Jerry McGovern. He was one of their top forensic auditors. He had done the entire state of Tennessee. He'd done $1 trillion audit in Tennessee, and it was startling. The result of that audit was startling. That's the reason they don't want to have a forensic audit. I mean, what came out in the testimony in that arbitration was just, it was mind-boggling. We had the treasurer at the time and the auditor testified that the city backdated checks from one fiscal year to another, that in fact they intentionally delayed bills, they misappropriated money, that they had 25 accounts for health care, which was absurd since they only need one. I mean, it was just it was so startling when you looked at this, that even the arbitrator, and I remember that quote, and I can quote it verbatim without in front of me. She said, "It was apparent that the city's books were in a total state of disarray." And the problem is, that was in 1991. And we are in 2014, and the books are still in a total state of disarray. Nobody knows anything. We don't even know, who's paying or who commissioned a project for the city. So, the reality is, do we need an investigation? Yes. Do we need an audit? Yes. Will we get it? Well, that's another question, because I don't think anybody that's involved in this city government wants this, because you may see a whole bunch of them walking out with handcuffs.
Well, Chip, there's been a lot with petitions of different sorts going on in the last 3 or 4 years. But I can recall back in 2003 or 2005, when then mayoral candidate Henry Gillette was talking about an audit, and I believe he actually went around and got some signatures to the process, but the problem was the way he conducted that it wasn't binding. So maybe that's a way we get it. Maybe up with the charter review that Councilor Maioza and his group are, maybe that's something we could put into the charter, that every so many years, 5, 10 years, we have a full and complete comprehensive forensic audit of the city finances.
Yeah, and I think you're right, but I think, what we have to deal with, and CJ, if, weigh in, obviously, I think that, we've got you here, and it's good to have you here because, I mean, you're not somebody who just got involved recently. You have a perspective that a lot of these people who are even involved in a recall, and I commend them all, because some of them are engaged with politics for the first time in their life. Some are voting for almost the first time in their life, and some of them being involved for the first time. Yet you go back a long time. You've been speaking in front of the council about issues for many, many years. And so it's people like you that, can bring a perspective as to, we've seen governments that we've disagreed with. We've seen administrations that we didn't agree with. But, I mean, is it just me, or has this city just completely fallen apart? I don't know. CJ, you can speak to that, and Danny, because, I mean, we go back a long way in politics, and it's like I've never seen this city in such a total state of chaos.
Well, it starts with the finances. You've said it many times. Bonding is through the roof. I remember when we received some $11 million from BFI for the landfill. I'm not sure whether it was more than host fees. There was some pollution fees, and that money got wiped away by Bob Correa mostly. Maybe if we had some of that $11 million and it was spent more prudently, we wouldn't have, well, pay as you throw, I think, is an absolute disaster. I said it during the budget. It's one of the principal reasons, among others, that I oppose the budget. But, had we set some of that money aside, maybe pay as you throw wouldn't have even been on the table. Safer grants, public safety, all these things, it's a collective effort of financial mistakes and poor management that have put us where we are.
Well, I think what's really funny is that no matter how much we contact our state delegation, who, by the way, taped their show prior to us going on the air, or we contact the governor's office or the appointed and elected members of the cabinet, we get nothing. They don't answer us. They don't respond to us.
Well,
and these are people that are supposed to represent us.
Well, but CJ, you're right, and those of us that follow this know it. But let's look at our state delegation. I mean, with all due respect to the positions they hold, they really have no clout. They're all essentially basically rookies. I mean, when you look at some of the former state delegation members we had, Joan Menard, Bob Correa, Mike Herron, help me, Chip, I know there's others that were there, but when you compare that to now Carol Fiola, Alan Sylvia, Paul Schmidt, Kevin Aguirre, look, these people, I suppose they're trying, but I don't think they're just, I think they're just not respected on the Hill. They haven't been there long enough, and I've said it for years. Really, no matter who the state delegation members are, I really believe that Fall River is a pimple on Boston's backside.
Oh, that's true. There's no question about it. They don't even like to acknowledge that we're real. But, we have to start, making things very clear. And it's very interesting. I mean, How many people knew that the governor was going to be at the old Lincoln Park today at 2 o'clock? How's that for information? Because this was going to be, if you remember correctly, the old Lincoln Park was supposed to be a huge condo complex and shopping area and whatnot. Well, now it's being made into a mixed housing situation. And we know
Mixed housing, the code word.
the code word,
Mixed
mixed housing, yes. So now we know what's going to go into Lincoln Park.
Let's get rid of more of our welfare cases.
Exactly.
Let's ship them down to the South Coast.
I mean, it's just unbelievable. And then again, you have the Attorney General, Martha Coakley, and Charlie Baker are going to be at UMass Dartmouth at 4 o'clock for their debate. So we know what's going to happen. They're all going to go at 2 o'clock to here, and members of our delegation made it very clear that they were going to go down there to Dartmouth, and then they're all going to run over to UMass Dartmouth and be there because they want to hear what both of them are going to say. This is getting to be crazy because it is an election year. The election's coming up in approximately a month, and what's going to happen? Who are we going to get?
And another thing I have to mention before I forget for all our viewers out there, and hopefully that are watching us live, not the ones that are watching on tape, it'll be too late, but at 12 o'clock, Councilor Correa is supposed to be on the local radio making a statement about basically everything, according to him, about the criminal case, about the situation in the city, and about many things. So if you get a chance, listen to the podcast. That's important. But, I'm glad we kind of brought up Boston because it's something that I've always had a problem with this.
You're kidding, Chip. You have a problem with Boston?
Yeah. Well, no, it's the fact that our legislative delegation, they have an obligation to help this area. But what to me, and it's just my personal opinion, obviously, but they don't have an obligation to subsidize incompetency and mismanagement. And many times, they don't hold this city accountable because no matter how badly we mismanage the school department or any department in this community, I've never heard a rep tell any sitting mayor, listen, you keep coming up here begging for money, but you guys are just throwing it in a hole. For example, Fall River reported to the state that in the last 2 fiscal years, they've saved $12.1 million with their health care cost shift to the employees. So they basically took $12 million out of the pockets of the retirees and the city employees by giving them much higher co-pays and giving them a really horrible plan. For example, an individual went before the city council this week with me, whose 80-year-old mother had patches that she was paying $35 for a 3-month supply, and now under the new plan, he has to pay $1,650 for those patches. So do the math. But all this money that they basically picked from the pockets of people who work has disappeared into that giant hole, that vortex that we call the city budget. It's disappeared, just like the paperwork on the windows, just like everything else that happens in the city of Fall River. And to me, it bothers me that this kind of incompetence isn't questioned by our state delegation.
Well, Chip, and I consider you my healthcare expert for all things city because you've been dealing with, but I'm not even sure that $12 million was actually there because I've heard Kathy Viveras, the city administrator, say at least half a dozen times, and correct me if I'm wrong on the process or anything, that they only budget what they feel they're going to need. So if that money's there, where did it go? But is it really there? Is there physically $12 million there? Because as I listened to her comment, it doesn't seem like there is.
Well, there's where we get back to that magic word. This is why we need an audit. Because that is a total misrepresentation of fact. They pay 2 months in arrears because of the way the bills are processed. But every year when they vote on the budget, the city appropriates a line item for what the cost is for the annual health care for their 75%. So theoretically, your budget's supposed to reflect the actual money that you have, because when I make a budget, I can't say I got $12 million in my budget when I don't, because when I start paying my bills and I find out I got $12, I'm in trouble. But only the city of Fall River can do this. This is why we need accountability and an audit, because nothing, and I'm saying absolutely nothing, that has been said to this council in the last 5 years has ever been the same at the next meeting, let alone been accurate.
No.
So,
Yeah.
CJ, come on, weigh in here.
Why? I'm enjoying this because I don't have to say a lot today, and everyone's stealing my lines. So, you know, they're making it very interesting. It's just craziness that we live in this situation, that, you know, people do and say what they do. And they do it with no facts. And we know this. How many times have we confronted the council with missing money, with numbers that didn't work out? And of course, we're always told over and over and over again, when you ask a question from the auditor or the treasurer, you know, how much is there? Where is it going? I'll have to get back and get back to you with that. I'll have to research it.
That's the treasurer's famous line.
Yes, it is.
We don't hear much from the auditor. He very rarely, if ever, appears before the council. No. But the other thing, I was absolutely flabbergasted that you know, as much as I disagreed with Councilor Casey's vote on the investigation, and she voted no, and everybody that's watched over the years could have predicted that, at least she had the courage to go on the record. So I give her kudos for that. I am absolutely 1,000% disgusted with the councilor in seat 3, Councilor Paul Da Silva, who had the audacity to vote present.
Yeah, well, I think the only thing that was present was his physical being, because I don't think his mind has been present in that council chamber since he was elected. I mean, you're right. It was a travesty. We have a city councilor, and as you said, even though I think voting against an investigation of how money was lost and misappropriated is absurd. But we know Councilor Casey is a rubber stamp. But to basically vote, I don't want to have an investigation, I don't even want to talk about it, I'm just here, like the handle on a broken piss pot. And that's what he is. So the fact is, that's about as useful as he is. So, and it's unfortunate, but here's another guy, a first-term city councilor, who should never, ever, ever be allowed to sit in a chair and represent the people again.
He needs to be defeated. We need a new chairman of the Committee on Public Safety, because essentially I think they've had 2 or 3 meetings since January. We have a fire department with manpower at low levels. I just think that as bad as Councilor Casey is, that Councilor Da Silva is even worse, because he's just not willing to take a stand on anything, and it's cowardly. It's cowardly, and I hope the voters defeat Councilor Da Silva in the next election.
Hopefully he'll have enough courage not even to pull papers, because I think it just goes to show how little respect he has for the public to even run for that office. So Danny, we want to thank you for being here. As usual, you are a wealth of information, and we appreciate you showing up today.
Thank you, guys. People watch Spindle City Straight Talk, the #1 rated show on FRC Media.
Thanks for watching, and have a great day.
We did a half hour and 30 seconds.